Welcome to episode 4 of season 4 of the Filmmaker Film Watcher podcast. I'm filmmaker Richard DiGregorio.
And I'm film watcher Greg Ralph.
So this episode, it's quite an interesting episode, Greg. It's called A Fistful of Oscars. Tell us about it.
Well, this was actually suggested to us by our friend Natasha. Hi, Natasha.
Hi, Natasha.
Who pointed out to us that in the history of the Oscars, there are, in fact, only 3 films that have won what they call the Big Five. So that's Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Actress, and Best Screenplay.
The Big Five.
Yeah, the Big Five. And so today we're looking at the Big Three. Those 3 films that won those Big Five awards. So we're not actually going to pre-announce what each one is. We'll just get into each one and kind of show the discovery of what these films are, but we will do them in chronological order. So Ricardo, why don't you get us going? And you're going to start us with a film from the 1930s.
Yes, we're looking at the 1934 film, It Happened One Night. Directed by Frank Capra, this 1934 romantic comedy begins in Miami, aboard a yacht, where spoiled rich socialite Ellie Andrews, Claudette Colbert, is trapped by her controlling Wall Street banker father, Walter Connolly, who has just annulled her secretive marriage to aviator, King Wesley, Jamison Thomas. She's so unhappy with her father's decision that she literally jumps out of the yacht and swims to shore, running away. Her purpose? To get to King Wesley in New York. Enter cynical reporter Peter Warne, Clark Gable, who has just been fired from his job. On the bus to New York, he meets Ellie, who has stolen his seating space. Realizing there is enough space for 2, they reluctantly sit together. He sees Ellie as a spoilt little brat. But when they stop for a 30-minute break, a thief steals her suitcase and money. Ellie doesn't report to the police for fear of being brought back to her father. Peter recognizes who Ellie is and persuades her to travel together with him, promising to protect her, and in return he would write of her adventure to meet King Wesley, hence most likely getting his job back. Ellie's disappearance has now become major news as her father places a $10,000 reward for her. Along their journey, Ellie warms to Peter, who is quite considerate. He blocks off half the room with a rope and a blanket to keep her privacy. He calls this the Wall of Jericho. When she wakes, he has her clothes pressed and is making her breakfast. When detectives come looking, they both act the part of husband and wife, and Ellie starts warming to him and the adventure. She slowly falls in love with Peter, and Peter starts falling for her. One night, she professes her love for him, but he knocks her back, being increasingly frustrated as he knows she's married and going back to King Wesley. By the time he thinks about it, she's asleep. So he has an idea to write a story of their adventure, with the end being that she'll marry him and not King Wesley. Then things go awry when she wakes to not find him there anymore. Look, I'm not going to spoil the end here because this is really an enjoyable film. Both Gable and Colbert are wonderful. You'll feel like you've sort of seen this before, but in 1934, no one had. The structure of this romantic comedy has since been used in many films of its type. Boy meets girl, they are opposites who attract, fall for each other with one thing to overcome that's stopping them from being together. It's so familiar. So kudos must be given to screenwriter Robert Riskin, who adapted this from a short story written by Samuel Hopkins Adams. I was, however, a little confused at the beginning, not knowing that Ellie was with her father on the yacht. I sort of didn't know who the father was. I don't think it's ever said. Directorially and style-wise, it's pretty standard fare. Capra's direction really shines with the characters here, and less visually. Gable's character even became an inspiration in the creation of Bugs Bunny from the scene where he's eating the carrots. Amazingly, Colbert thought the film would be awful after she finished it. Boy, was she wrong. Greg, what did you think?
There's so much in there I want to respond to, but I'll start with what I thought of the film. I loved it.
Yeah.
But I didn't love it at first. So when I watched it the first time, I found it really distant for the first half. And I think a lot of that is to do with the fact that it was made almost 100 years ago. And so you have some scenes which are, on the version that I watched, quite fuzzy at times. And, she has these amazing eyebrows, like parabola across her forehead.
Yeah, she does. I saw it on iTunes, but that's the restored 4K version.
I had a DVD, sorry. But so I just felt a bit distanced from it. I wasn't confused. I actually think they did make it clear that this was her father.
I watched it twice and I couldn't pick that up.
I watched it twice.
Yeah, but I couldn't pick that up.
And I watched the 2 musical remakes as well.
Wow.
But no, it was pretty clear to me the first time through. But I just thought, because it's a film I'd always meant to see. I hadn't seen it before. It's Frank Capra, and you know that I love Frank Capra. We both love It's a Wonderful Life that he made
absolutely
10, 12 years later. But I wasn't liking it. I just thought, it's going to be one of those films that I wanted to like that I won't like. And then something shifted about halfway through. And it took me a while even to realise that it had shifted in me. And it was really only towards the end when Clark Gable's character, Peter, goes to talk to her father when she's supposed to be getting married. Yes. And they have a conversation. And I suddenly realised I was rooting for Peter. Not, here we go. Here's the old rom-com plot, which, again, 80, 100 years later, we've seen so many times before, but back then it was fresh, as you say. But I was rooting for him. And I realised I actually was very engaged in the story, and that's why I went and watched the 2 remakes and then went back and watched the original again to work out what was going on. And you're right, she begins to fall in love with him when they had that mock argument, pretending to be a husband and wife to elude the detectives. But it's the night before when things between them start to shift because he's such a gentleman. She thinks he's put them in the same cabin as a ploy to basically have sex.
That's right.
And he is the perfect gentleman.
He's so considerate.
He is. And look, they're both really good in this film, but I thought Gable was just...
He's phenomenal.
Phenomenal. He was stunning. He was very handsome, dare I say, beautiful. The nuances of his acting and his expressions were just spot on.
Yeah, they are.
You're right, Claudette Colbert thought it was the worst film she'd ever made, but she had history in this as well. So she didn't want to make the film originally because she had made a film before with Capra. She made a silent film called For the Love of Mike, and it tanked. And she wasn't that crazy about film. She was much more of a theatre actress to start with. And then when they came to her and said, will you do this film? She said eventually, look, I'll do it, but I want double my usual salary, and I'm going on a planned holiday in 4 weeks, so we have to make it in 4 weeks. And that's exactly what they did. But she turned up, and she sounds like she's a bit of a grump on the set. Mm-hmm. So... from what I've read and heard, Gable and Capra had a great time making this film together. And Gable was making a film that was different to his normal persona. He wasn't playing the tough guy. Yeah. He's a man's man, but there's a lot more to him. He's softer, he's wittier.
He is. And there's one scene I really loved when they're on the bus and Shapley.
Yep. Who we must talk about.
When he's acting like he's a big mafia man, and it's a brilliantly done scene. And then at the very end of that scene, he toughly sort of goes and spits, but he gets it on his jacket
and his chin,
and his chin. Yeah, that's right. Little moments like that, but they're the little things which are great.
Well, there are lots of little things in this film to love, but I just want to finish that other story. So, do you know what happened when she won the Oscar?
Oh, apparently she wasn't there. Was she not there?
She was convinced she wasn't going to win, and she was about to hop on a train on another holiday, and she got announced as the winner, and I think it was Warner said, go grab her and bring her in. So she came in her travelling outfit to receive the Oscar from Shirley Temple. It's a very Hollywood kind of story. But yeah, she was just convinced. It was slow burn. It didn't get a lot of PR, and it was one of those films where people, and it wasn't in sort of premiere cinemas, but it got released, and people saw it, and that classic thing of they told their friends, and it built up, and it just became a loved film.
I didn't take as long to get into it as you did. It was that opening sequence, and then it's when they really
on the boat. You mean?
Together. Yeah, and then when they got to the bus, and when she's taking his seat, bang, I was in.
No, it took me longer, certainly, yeah.
Yeah, no, it was fine, yeah.
Now, you've made the connection between this film and Bugs Bunny, but there are
Yes.
three connections. You've only mentioned one. So here's the pop quiz. What are the other two? I'll give you a clue. They both revolve around this character, Shapley.
Okay, no, tell me.
So Fritz Freleng, who was one of the people who influenced the creation of Bugs Bunny.
Bugs Bunny, yes.
This was one of his favourite films. And what he picked up on was that nonchalant chewing of the carrots with a mouthful and talking, but also in that false confrontation between Clark Gable's character and this Shapley guy. Shapley calls him Doc a few times during the film.
Oh, he does.
And then Clark Gable says to him, tells him a story about somebody else who got on the wrong side of the supposed gang who got done. And the name of that gangster, do you remember?
I forget. It escapes me.
Bugs Dooley.
Bugs.
So we've got Doc, Bugs, and the chewing of the carrots. And apparently that's where it comes from. There's another...
But the way he acts, though, in that sequence with the carrots... The way he acts is a bit Bugs Bunny-ish as well.
But the other way around. Bugs Bunny's a bit Clark Gable-ish. Really, that's where it comes from.
Yeah, that's right.
What I really liked... There were two things I really liked about this film, apart from those central performances. One was how much attention the film paid to ordinary people and ordinary moments in life. So when they arrive at the first... pit stop where you can get off and get a cup of coffee or a meal and so on.
Yeah.
There's a scene that makes no sense because it doesn't pay off or anything, like a moment where this old guy whispers in the ear of the guy who's saying, come and get your hamburgers, and he tells him the toilet's around the back or something. It's just an ordinary moment. But the film's full of that. There's that lovely tracking shot when she goes to the showers the morning after.
That's right.
The first night together.
Yeah,
and it's just a long tracking shot as she walks through this trailer park towards the showers. And it just goes past people, children playing with balls, someone digging a garden.
I really loved that shot because it showed to me that she's not a part of this life. She's not a part of this world.
Well, then she goes. She doesn't realise it's a queue for the shower. She thinks she can walk straight in. Yeah,
yeah, absolutely. But that showed that, and I like that about her character because she does change. Yep. She likes this adventure. She likes not being high society.
Well, she's being very sheltered. She makes that very clear.
So when Clark Gable says, I want a woman who's going to, want to go on adventures, who's going to want to, sleep with me under the stars, go to these islands. Well, she says, I can be that person.
Well, actually, you've stumbled into the second thing I really love about this, which is the writing. And that scene, I wrote it down because I just thought the language was lovely. So when he's lying in bed on the other side of the blanket on their last night before they get to New York.
The Wall of Jericho.
Yes, of the blankets, yes. And he's talking about this fantasy of going to an island going back to an island in the Pacific that he went to. And he talks about the experience and he says, nights when you, the moon and the water all become one. You feel you're part of something big and marvellous. That's the only place to live. And then the line I loved, he says, the stars are so close overhead, you feel you could reach up and stir them around. It was such a lovely image, and I just believed that he felt this way. So the writing at points was fantastic. And I've said a couple of times already that I did go and watch the two remakes. There's an appalling one made in the mid-40s, a black and white one, where they basically dump half the script, then cut out the first half of what's left, and write this whole other story. And it's only about halfway through when you start hearing some of the scenes and the lines again, you realise it's actually the same film. They changed the characters, they changed the names and so on.
It's not called It Happened One Night, though, is it?
No. The first one, the 1940s one, is called Eve Knew Her Apples, 1946 with Ann Miller, where she's a radio songstress on the run from her manager who wants her to do more work.
Yes.
And the reporter confuses her with an escaped female murderer who sings before she kills her victims. And then in 1956, June Allison and Jack Lemmon made a film called You Can't Run Away From It, which is better. It sticks much more closely to the script, keeps the names and so on. But a lot of the wit and the sparkle from the original version is lost savagely in the one from 1946, but even in the one 10 years later, there's that chemistry between the leads and some of the best dialogue like that one about the Pacific Island, it's dumped. And so they're much lesser beings than the original.
Yeah, look, it's a wonderful screenplay. It's a really good screenplay. So I got the best screenplay at the Oscars. So it was a really good script, and the performances were great as well. Like I really think it stands the test of time.
It does.
It really does. I wasn't bored at all. And what I loved about it was they say this was done pre-code.
Yep.
Right. So
it's quite racy for its time.
Well, this was released 4 weeks, I think it was, or 4 weeks just before the code really set in, which was the code for vulgarity and whatnot, which they brought in because they didn't have censorship back then in the 1930s. So they were getting a lot of differing states, having different laws pertaining to what they could show and whatnot. So they brought in this blanket law of, the Motion Picture Association with this code, which was, you're not allowed to have this vulgarity, you're not allowed to have this or that, because a lot of racy things started coming out at that time. Before that code came in, there were a few racy films coming out where you go, oh my God, that was done before at that time.
Claudette Colbert herself is an example of that. She'd made a film that year where she was, I think, Cleopatra bathing in a bath of ass's milk, where there wasn't a lot left to the imagination. And then she switches and she plays this woman who has never been alone with a man. It's quite a shift.
Yeah, absolutely. But there's one scene in there where not only just the leg being, with the hitchhiking scene being shown, but also in that in one of the last sequences when she's falling for him, and there's the wall of Jericho, there's the blanket there, and she takes off her clothes just to her undergarment, and I thought that was quite racy for its time.
Oh yeah,
But this was all done before the code, or 4 weeks before the code set in. So, I mean, you had the Stanley Donen film at one point, which one film it was, where you couldn't have a man and woman in bed together. So
or if they were, one had to have one foot on the floor.
Yeah, but what Stanley Donen did was use the split screen to have them both in the same bed together. They worked out ways to do things, but it was very limiting. And then they brought in the 60s the classification, and that sort of changed all of that.
Another thing I love about this film, and in fact my wife pointed it out to me, there's almost no music. It's often very silent.
You're right. There's no score. Not really.
The only time you have anything remotely resembling a score is when characters sing. So you have the bus people singing The Daring Young Man on the Flying Trapeze.
Which is a really interesting sequence. Let's talk about that sequence there, because that's a moment in the movie, which I really love. That's sort of just, you're just sitting there listening to these people, and looking at their reactions to what's going on. I thought it was a lovely moment.
Well, Frank Capra has the common touch. He never forgot that he was an immigrant himself. He arrived, he had that classic experience of arriving at the age of 6 in New York Harbour and seeing the Statue of Liberty. And he understood the immigrant experience, how hard his parents worked. And so the shot of the people in the trailer park, the other shot I love is when Clark Gable's waiting at a level crossing and the train goes past and all the tramps are on board waving to him and he's waving happily back.
Yes.
He's very grounded. I think the song part, which might have failed in another film or with maybe another director, is just that it's ordinary people sitting on the bus and they're entering into the communal spirit by singing this stupid song about, the trapeze artist who stole my love away. Yeah. That was actually a song from music halls 50, 60, 70 years prior.
Yeah.
The other thing, so often, the sound design is great. Sometimes they're lying in bed and all you hear is the rain falling and it's a lovely backdrop.
Yeah.
The camera loves both of their faces.
Oh, it really does.
It's very big on catching the light from her eyes at night, and off her cheekbones sometimes. But the other extraordinary thing about this film, and it took me a while to really quite process it and then go back and check, you don't get the payoff of the love story with the two of them.
No, you don't.
In fact, that's for the last, 20 minutes plus of the film, the only time you see them together is when they go past each other in cars and he sees her but she doesn't see him. They have a bit of a sour salute to each other when he's leaving her house. And
That's right.
They interact for all of about 20 seconds, and then you never see them together again. In fact, you don't see him for the last, 10 minutes of the film?
Yeah.
You get, don't want to spoil it too much, but you get a comic payoff in the fact that they end up together at the very end of the film. But
that's right.
They're not together.
Payoff there, but no.
That's so non-rom-com.
I just wanted to see them together once.
Well, what they did do...
One more time.
Yeah.
One more time. Just together, hugging or a kiss or something. I wanted to see something.
Well, the one thing they did that I liked in the 1956 version with Jack Lemmon and June Allison is that she runs from the wedding across the big, mansion property, and she cuts off his car at the front gate, and she stops him by turning around and lifting up her wedding dress and showing the back of her leg again in a reference back to the hitchhiking scene. I thought that was the one thing they did that was a really great thing against the rest, which was, so-so. But I would have liked that payoff as well, but it's quite extraordinary that we didn't get it. But you get the comedy instead.
We were so invested in the characters that I would have rather see them together than that comic payoff. That's just me.
Well, they didn't have to be mutually exclusive. You could have done the June Allison bit, and then and they did. In fact, they did have that same end scene in the other film, but it wasn't done as well either. So, what are you going to give this film?
I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. It's enjoyable.
So,
and for what it did for cinema and for a genre, it's worthy of an 8.
So, if I told you I gave it 10.
Oh, wow, you gave it 10?
No, I didn't. I gave it 9.
Oh, wow, okay. I thought that would be weird. That's it.
Well,
I thought I didn't think you'd give it a 10.
Well, to put it against Frank Capra's It's a Wonderful Life, which is a solid 10 for me, it's not that. No. But
it's far from that, actually.
Yeah. And well, I teetered 8 or 9, I have to say, but I gave it a 9 because it really did set a genre and the ground rules, if you like, for that genre. Right. It's very entertaining, and it's a film. So I watched it twice in the space of half a week or so.
Yeah.
Which I might not have done if we weren't doing it for the podcast, but I really enjoyed it, and I wanted to go back and just look at how that turnaround developed in me because of the characters and the story. So I think for me, and having watched those 2 remakes, for me it's it's been remade but never bettered, and I just think it's an excellent film, but it's not a 10.
Yeah. So, Greg, tell us about the next Big 5 Oscar winner.
Well, this is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest from 1975. And I studied the book at school, and so I saw the film not long after it came out. But the teachers at my Catholic school were known to put their hands in front of the projector when there were horror sex scenes. So this might actually be the first time I've actually seen the film all the way through. It tells the story of minor criminal R.P. McMurphy, Jack Nicholson, who tries to get out of prison labour by pleading insanity. As a result, he's sent to a psychiatric hospital in Oregon for evaluation. He's assigned to a male ward implacably managed by Nurse Ratched, Louise Fletcher, where he quickly becomes the centre of attention as he brings energy and care into this highly regulated world, seeking to undermine Ratched's regime. His rebellion escalates to hijacking a busload of the more competent patients. He takes them fishing with his lover Candy, Mariah Small, on board for him to catch up on more carnal pleasures. These men blossom as they're exposed to McMurphy's all-American male activities, such as baseball, fishing, card games with rude cards, and sex. You can very much read this psychiatric ward as a Freudian portrayal of a dysfunctional family. There's a mother figure controlling the men in her care, emasculating them by reminding them of their deficiencies as men. And towards the end, she demolishes the newfound independence of a patient, Billy Bibbett, Brad Dourif in an Oscar-nominated performance, by threatening to tell his mother, her good friend, that he has had sex. The men's universe is notionally led by a distant and ineffectual man, Dr. Spivey, played by Dean R. Brooks, the real-life superintendent of Oregon State Hospital. It's telling that when the committee of male doctors suggests that they move McMurphy elsewhere, it's the female nurse who suggests that they solve this problem, and it's her opinion that rules. But although it's tempting to reduce this film to a Freudian framework, there is more to it. This depth is mostly grounded in the quiet relationship that develops between McMurphy and an Indigenous American patient, Chief Bromden, Will Sampson, who has chosen to be regarded as deaf and dumb. It's Chief Bromden who eventually achieves McMurphy's dream of escape. I recognise the quality of this film and the quality of its acting. Jack Nicholson is superb and deserves his Oscar, if only for the scene where he undergoes electroconvulsive therapy, ECT. Nicholson and Fletcher both witnessed ECT treatment as part of their preparation for their roles. In some ways, Louise Fletcher's performance is the more difficult of the two. While Nicholson's character creates havoc, she seemingly has little to do in a very controlled performance until the very end. Director Milos Forman deserves full credit for his work, not least for the careful preparation that saw the actors experience psychiatric hospital life before filming commenced. They work well as an ensemble. Forman's intention was to have distinctive but unknown faces around his star, although some of those faces are now much better known. Danny DeVito, Christopher Lloyd, Doc from the Back to the Future trilogy, Vincent Schiavelli, who played the subway ghost in the film Ghost, and Michael Berryman, who played the psychotic Pluto in the horror film The Hills Have Eyes. But only 3 actors were credited in the opening titles. Apart from Nicholson and Fletcher, the third was William Redfield, who plays the mustachioed patient Harding. This film was to be where he hit the big time, but sadly he died the following year of leukemia. In its day, this film was a sympathetic eye-opener into a world that probably hadn't had a lot of attention before. This would explain why Dean R. Brooks was so keen to support its making at his hospital. But I don't love this film. I think at heart I'm uncomfortable with its portrayal of women. There are very few female characters, and of those that there are, they're very passive, such as assistant nurse Itsu, or they're sources of emasculation, including mentions of the patient's various mothers and wives, or they're providers of sex and not much else, such as Candy and her friend Rose, or the women in 52 positions on McMurphy's playing cards. Forman was very keen to make a film that reflected his earlier life in the oppression of Czechoslovakia, about the need to resist conformity. I fear that perhaps he's made a film about the need to sideline women. But Ricardo, did you go cuckoo for this film?
I remember watching this many years ago, and I didn't love it back then. But I was a bit young. I think I was 17 or 18 at the time, and I thought I'd get more out of it this time, being a bit older. And
I would have been 13, 14 when I first saw it.
Yeah, and I must say I enjoyed it more than back then. But no, I don't love the movie. I don't. For a 5-time Oscar Best Picture winner, I don't sit there going, this is just a marvel. You know, I can appreciate it. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the performances. I appreciate, the moments in it, and how Jack Nicholson's character really affects these other characters around him.
It's a virtuoso
in such a positive
performance.
way. It really is. I love the moment when they go fishing. I thought something bad was going to happen on the boat, and it didn't. They didn't go there, which I really liked. So look, Jack Nicholson's character didn't have to be there. That was the whole point of the film. He didn't have to be there. He didn't have the mental health issues as the others did.
Well, he thought he was on a lurk.
Well, absolutely. But to see him and to see what happened to him it's heartbreaking. It really is heartbreaking because, he had an out.
Yep.
He could leave. He had the out, and he didn't go there. And what they did to him was pretty
savage,
pretty criminal and savage. Yeah, his relationship to the chief was another really great relationship, and that was one of the actual one part of the film I really remembered, and it was the strongest part in the first time I saw it was that relationship.
Have you read the book?
No, I haven't.
Oh, because in the book, the chief is the narrator of the story.
Oh, wow, I didn't know
So he
that.
tells the whole story of what happens, and he can reveal things because no one thinks he can hear them. So he's privy to stuff going on in the war that maybe others wouldn't have been. So he's in fact, apart from McMurphy, he is the central character because he's the narrator.
Yeah. Well, Nicholson carries the film, but look, Fletcher is so wonderful in this role. She's just ultra control. That's what she is. And I hadn't thought about it from the female perspective of the portrayal of women, but I think you're right. I think that's a real problem because I kept on wanting the other nurse to do something, but she was really a nothing character. Really, did she need to be there? Why was she sitting so close to? There was no real character arc to that character at all.
Well, in the book, when he goes, I think I've got this right. When he goes to the ECT treatment or some other treatment outside the ward, there's another nurse there who provides the treatment, bandaging or something, but who is much more a sympathetic character, very smart and kind of whiplash kind of character, but a more well-rounded character that Kesey, I think, had in the story, deliberately or maybe not, to balance that out. But there is no balance like that in the film.
No, that's right. So you got the two women who just want to have sex, and it's just brought in for that purpose.
Yep.
Fletcher, who's controlling and quite mean.
Yep.
And a passive other female character. So you're right. There's not a good balance there with female characters, even though Fletcher is a strong character, which is great. But there's not a lot of liking to her at all. There's not a lot of dimension to Fletcher. I don't find there's a lot of dimension to that character.
No. She, apparently, Bo Goldman, who was one of the writers of the screenplay, said that he based the character on his mother-in-law.
Oh, wow.
And said the sorts of things she would say, so his name is Bo Goldman, she would say, well, Bo, yes, you might think that, but in fact... And he said she was an absolute graduate of a school of passive-aggressive behaviour.
Yeah, queen of passive-aggressive.
Yeah, and that's what she does.
That character. And it's all about control.
The irony is that in the making of the film, Louise Fletcher was actually the one who, in some ways, was controlled. So they spent, I think, 4 weeks at the hospital doing improv kind of stuff. They were each assigned a patient by the director of the hospital who plays Spivvy, the head of the hospital.
Yes.
They were each assigned a patient who he thought mirrored the kind of issues their character would have, like Danny DeVito and co. And they would spend time with them, observing them and so on. And they would do all this stuff in the ward together. But she was deliberately kept outside of all that. And she said, I would watch them having fun, but I wasn't allowed to have the fun. Because he really wanted to develop this culture of, the men bonding and being like they'd been in the ward, for however long. And she was quite separate. So the actress herself was kept quite separate and controlled from being part of that interaction, which is a bit ironic.
It's really interesting because the filmmaking-wise, all three of the films we are talking about tonight, the directors really let the actors act in them. Visually, in terms of just fancy tricks or anything like that with their camera, there's nothing there in all three of them. No fancy thing. It's really all about character.
No CGI.
No CGI.
No car chases.
No, it's just all about character and psychology, really. Even in It Happened One Night, there's a lot going on there as well.
Yeah, but two of those films, and maybe It Happened One Night, they actually share something else, which is their attitudes towards women. We might talk about this more in the next film because I don't want to say what it is yet. But
sure.
There was a little bit of that in It Happened One Night. So Ellie's father slaps her on the yacht to try and get through to her. They both look a bit shocked by that, but there was that. Clark Gable says to her, I'll break your neck.
Yeah, I found that quite strong.
He told her to shut up quite violently at one stage.
He did. Yeah, he told her to shut up twice, actually.
Yeah, so it was kind of...
And he said, I'll break your neck.
Yeah.
And I just went, whoa, that's a bit strong.
So it was kind of there.
He apologises for that, but really, I just thought that's a really strong thing to say.
Yeah. So it's kind of in that film. It's not a big thing. It kind of rubs a bit. It's very much in this film. And in the next film, when we talk about it, I can pick that up again. I just think, so do you have to sort of not like women to make the big picture film?
No, okay. We'll talk about it in the next one. I don't think it's of that sort of nature in this next one, but we'll chat about that. But with this one here, I just it doesn't do that much for me when I watch it.
No, I almost felt obliged to like it.
Yeah, I feel a bit like that too. I feel like oh my God, I have to give this a high score, but do I? It's not. It doesn't touch me in the way which it probably should. Nicholson really holds the whole thing together.
Yep.
And Nicholson, if he's not in a scene, it really does fall apart a bit. He really carries the lot.
One thing I hadn't realised when I watched the film, I watched a making of thing where I picked up on it. So the character, the bald, very unusual looking guy.
Yes.
He's had the lobotomy. So he's actually a precursor of what Jack Nicholson will be like.
Oh, wow.
And Chief Bromden would have seen that over, a long period of time, so he knew what Nicholson was going to be, and that's what made Nicholson's rendered state by the surgery intolerable. We haven't really talked about Brad Dourif, who plays Billy Bibbett.
Oh, no, we haven't
Because
actually. No,
he was nominated for Best Supporting Actor.
And that's another tragic moment as well. I mean, there was a few moments I remembered when I first watched it. I remember, funnily enough, I didn't remember the ending with the chief. I didn't remember the escape. I didn't remember that.
Oh, I did, because it's such a big thing in the book.
Yeah, but I didn't remember that. I thought I would have remembered that. But I remember Brad Dourif's character, Billy Bibbett,
and what happens
to him, and that was tragic. And what Fletcher does to him is just so appalling.
Well,
and,
she castrates him, basically.
She does, yeah, she does. It's quite chilling. She is quite chilling in that role.
Yeah.
That stare she has and that control is quite chilling.
Well, Brad Dourif was up for Best Supporting Actor, and he lost to George Burns for The Sunshine Boys, which I haven't actually seen, but I imagine there would have been quite a bit of, Oscar sentiment for such a long-lasting actor. But Dourif is good. Do you know what it was up against for Best Picture?
No.
So Barry Lyndon by Kubrick.
Oh, wow, yep.
Dog Day Afternoon with Pacino.
Great film.
Nashville, Robert Altman.
Never saw that.
And Jaws.
Wow.
So they're all quite different films.
They are.
And this was the one that stood out.
It's been a long time now, so we just know it as One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, that film.
Yeah.
But back then it would have been new and quite an amazing watch. But I do think it's kind of dated a little bit.
Well, I'm giving it 7 out of 10. I felt kind of, as I said, almost obliged to give it a higher rating because there are very good performances in it. And in its time, it was, I suspect, groundbreaking in what it did. Not only the story it told, but how they went about and made the story. They made it in an actual hospital. They spent time there and so on. But I'm not compelled by it.
No, I'm not either, and I'm giving it a 7 out of 10 as well. I'm with you. I was actually nearly veering on a 6, but I thought that was a bit too low for it. But I felt bad not giving it an 8 or 9 because I know that a lot of people love this film and that it is regarded as a classic. I can appreciate it, absolutely. But does it make me feel enough? Probably not.
So, Ricardo, I feel like there should be a drum roll to announce the third and final film that's won those big 5 Oscars.
Yes.
So, take us into the last one.
Okay, the film is Silence of the Lambs. Released in 1991 and directed by Jonathan Demme, Silence of the Lambs, based on a book by Thomas Harris, is a film that just sticks with you. Now let's get the plot out of the way quickly here because I really don't want to give too much away. Young FBI trainee Clarice Starling, Jodie Foster, is assigned by the special agent Jack Crawford, Scott Glenn, to assist in the case involving serial killer Buffalo Bill, Ted Levine, who has killed 5 people and skinned them. To gain an understanding of what makes a serial killer tick, Crawford instructs Clarice to see ex-psychiatrist serial killer Dr. Hannibal the Cannibal Lecter, Anthony Hopkins, in prison. Crawford believes that Hannibal may know something about Buffalo Bill and wants Clarice to get as much information as she can. Hannibal is very clever, however, and gives the information he knows to assist her in return for information on her. They both have their own agendas here. It's psychological thriller at its best. I read all 3 Thomas Harris books which feature Hannibal Lecter: Red Dragon, Silence of the Lambs, and its sequel, Hannibal. All of these have been made into films. Red Dragon was first made in 1986 as Manhunter, and then again as its original title in 2002. Hannibal was made in 2001, directed by Ridley Scott, but it's Silence of the Lambs which shows all of these films up. It is the best book-to-screen adaptation I have ever seen. Amazing work from Ted Talley to adapt this so well. Hopkins and Foster just, no pun intended, eat up their roles here. Their scenes together in this film would have to be some of the best scenes in cinema history. They just chew up the scenery.
I so knew that was coming.
They thoroughly deserve their Academy Awards here. Even though it's Foster's film, essentially, Hopkins was only on screen for a total of 15 minutes. But you'd never know it. That's the power of his performance. But everyone is perfectly cast here. There's not a bad performance in this film. But it's not just the performances which are perfect here. Everything is. The direction by Jonathan Demme here is perfection. Every frame is perfect. He knows what he's doing here, as beneath all of the horror here lies a film really about gender discrimination. Now, I can't go into this aspect too much, as it would spoil the film, really. Now, as I'm sure there are younger listeners now who haven't seen this movie, and they absolutely should. The cinematography by Tak Fujimoto is also chilling. From the opening, it's entirely bleak and gives you a really uneasy feeling. Even the black credits with white outlining have an effect. The musical score by Howard Shore puts you right into this uneasy world. Look, all I can say is wow with this film. Just see it. It's an absolute masterpiece. Greg, what are your thoughts on this movie?
Well, I'm going to continue with your cannibalism jokes and say that this movie is not to my taste.
Okay. I thought it might not be, but I thought you might really like the psychological aspects of it. It's beautifully made.
I don't know that you're going to get away with not explaining what you mean about it's a film about gender discrimination. I'm not sure that we can't talk about that without spoiling the plot. I thought you made a very interesting choice of words in your synopsis of the film when you say that the serial killer Buffalo Bill has killed and skinned 5 people.
Yeah.
Well, in fact, he's killed and skinned 5 women. And this is what I was obliquely referring to just earlier when we were talking about One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. This film, again, is a bit nasty about women, and I'm being sort of facetiously slight in saying that. It's a film that has 2 very, very good central performances from Jodie Foster and Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah.
Anthony Hopkins absolutely creates the character of Hannibal Lecter to the point where, like Freddy Krueger, he's become a staple of the horror landscape.
Well, getting to that just for a second, I'll just say that I think his performance in Silence of the Lambs is amazing, and he becomes a bit more of a caricature in the other versions of
Which I haven't seen.
Red Dragon and Hannibal. And I don't like, every time I look at those films, they're nowhere near the caliber as what he is in this. I think he's this is Hannibal Lecter characterization at its best and most chilling.
And the confrontations between the 2 leads at his cell with the glass wall between them, again, I think is iconic and very well done.
Amazing.
There's a thrilling sequence when Hannibal Lecter escapes from a holding cell elsewhere in a town hall or police station or somewhere, when you finally realise what he's done to escape, and we won't say what he does, is quite horrific.
Oh, yes,
it
is.
But that build-up to, well, what's going on, where is he, is very skillfully handled.
Oh, very well done.
But when you take out the story, those story elements, so the confrontations between the 2 of them at the cell, and that sequence of the escape of Hannibal Lecter, I actually find the rest of the film fairly ordinary in story. Not that different to other things I've seen with serial killers. It's, as I say, it's more gruesome and horrific in terms of what this person's doing, and eventually when you find out why. But I don't feel the same way you do
there's a
about
craftsmanship to this movie. There's a craft to this film that goes beyond when you even watch other thrillers and what that doesn't have the craftsmanship than this film does. Every frame it's perfect. It's edited so flawlessly. It doesn't hold on anybody too long. It is a masterstroke.
Well, I guess I was so disengaged from most of the story that I wasn't alive to those kind of things.
Yeah, wow.
I wasn't drawn into the film beyond some of those sequences. I thought there were some very nice touches. So when you talk about gender discrimination, well, certainly, the fact that these 5 women have had pretty horrific things happen to them.
Well, there's that, but it's also that
there's the woman in the well.
Yeah, there is.
Prisoner.
Well, that's right. But you've got Clarice Starling, who's.
Well, I'm coming to that, and that happens from the beginning. When we first meet her, she's on some outdoor assault course kind of thing at FBI Central. She comes into the building. It's quite clear she's an outsider, except for that one woman who's her friend.
Yes.
And then Crawford as well. As she walks through the corridors and you see how other people either ignore her or kind of look at her askance, you know that she's somehow a bit of an outsider there. And some of those moments, I think, are skillfully done, absolutely. The casting of her is really smart because apart from anything else, she's actually not very tall.
No, she's not. No.
And it really stands out. The first time she goes to see Hannibal Lecter, and Barney, the guard, who's briefing her on the rules, don't touch the glass.
That's
and
right.
So on.
Yes.
He is quite a tall, imposing man, and she might possibly come up to his sternum. So it flags the fact that she is, at least ostensibly, a slight character who could easily, in another story, be the victim, but she's not. She's feisty. She's smart.
That's right.
She knows how to play people.
Well, she's
a great character.
She's in a man's world, and she's struggling. She's
Yes.
trying to make her way in a man's world.
Well, even with Crawford, you get the sense that there's a lot of men who basically view her as a potential sex object.
Well, that's right. But
not much else.
When you look at, I think it's Dr. Childers. I think in the prison when she sees
Chilton.
Sorry, yes.
Yeah.
And he hits on her, and she rejects him. And he's not nice about it, being rejected.
No, he's a jerk.
But then you've got Miggs in the cell on the way down there, and what Miggs says to her, and as well, and what he flings at her, and
yes,
and
again, a lot of distaste.
That's in the book. It's in the book.
Well, that's fine. It doesn't mean I want to see a film about it.
No, that's right. No. But look, like I said, it's the best adaptation I've ever seen of it. When you read the book or you've seen the movie, it's vice versa. But then you've got her story of her upbringing and losing her father and losing the male role model in her life.
I was actually waiting for that to turn out to be a story she'd made up to bait him.
Right.
Yeah.
But then you've got the story of her wanting to save the lamb, and then you've got her wanting to save the girl in the well, in a very male-dominated world, chasing a serial killer who wants to be a woman. It's interesting.
Meh.
No?
Nah. I didn't particularly like his performance. Who played Buffalo Bill?
Ted Levine.
Yeah, I didn't do much for me.
No?
No. By the way, sorry.
Were you chilled? Were you chilled at all?
You wanted to know if I'd seen this before. And I thought I had, but I hadn't. I'm thinking of some other film where it got to the scary bit and I was on fast forward because I'm a bit of a wuss, as you know. And that was a film where Cary Elwes played a serial killer. I can't remember what it was. I thought I had seen this and I hadn't. I'd just seen some of those scenes, like the cell confrontations between the two leads. But I hadn't seen it. But I didn't feel creeped out like I thought I would. I just... I don't know. I didn't buy into it. And, I've seen serial killer films. I've seen films that...
This is the best one.
That do unpleasant things.
Yeah, this is the best one, though. There's a lot going on in this film. I'm still...
Yeah, I know, and I acknowledge that. But I'm stuck on... It's deeply unpleasant about women. So Betty Friedan, who's one of the famous sort of pioneering feminists in America... She had an interview the year after the film came out, and I'm with her. She said, I thought it was absolutely outrageous that Silence of the Lamb won so many Oscars. I'm not saying the movie shouldn't have been shown. I'm not denying the movie was an artistic triumph. Mm-hmm. But it was about the evisceration and the skinning alive of women. That's what I find offensive, not a Playboy centerfold. And I'm with her. It's just so unpleasant about women. Now, you've got a more of a healthy role model in Clarice Starling than you do in Nurse Ratched in
that's true.
Cuckoo.
That's true.
And it's interesting to put these two films side by side, more than It Happened One Night, which is a very different sort of film. But to put these two side by side, I find them troubling. It's women as victims, and victims in a really nasty way. Mm. And I think I understand that was necessary plot-wise to develop this character of Buffalo Bill, who, as you say, wanted to be a woman. But I don't know. There was a moment that when she finds Buffalo Bill's den, and then he turns the lights out, he's wearing night vision goggles.
Oh yeah, that's
that was very well done. So there were parts of it I enjoyed or admired in the broader story. And when she's in the dark, helplessly looking around, but we can see through his night vision goggles how close he is, and he's reaching out and almost touching her and enjoying that kind of that power. You know what that reminded me of? That reminded me of Wait Until Dark that we've reviewed in the past. The film about Audrey Hepburn being blind in the apartment.
Yeah, right.
Where she is blind, we can see in the same way that the bad guys can see.
That's right.
And it's that same helplessness.
That's true, yeah.
For me, I wondered if it was deliberately reminiscent. But there were parts that were very well done. But as I say, my problem was the heart of the story, I found deeply unpleasant.
Yeah, and it is an unpleasant film. It's not one which you're gonna go away loving. The story. I mean, it is an unpleasant story. It is, but for its genre, I think it's the best. I don't think there's another which surpasses it.
Well, I don't think there's another horror film in the history of the Oscars, for example, that has won Best Picture.
There's not. No, there's not. There's not.
And only 6 films have ever been nominated. 6 horror films have ever even been nominated for Best Picture.
Yes, right.
Do you know this film has something else in common with One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest? This is me doing my Oscar trivia kind of thing.
No, what is it?
Both films originally were going to cast Gene Hackman.
Oh, I did hear about this.
And for different reasons, it didn't go ahead. But do you know who else Demi approached to play Hannibal Lecter? And I just can't conceive of this film. He approached Sean Connery.
Oh, no way.
Jeepers.
No. Oh, Anthony Hopkins is just from when you first see him in the cell, that first moment when you see him just standing there.
Yes.
Always gets me. I just think that look of his.
You think about all the people it was offered to. It was offered to Sean Connery. It was offered to Al Pacino. It was offered to Robert De Niro, Dustin Hoffman. I think all of them wouldn't have done it well. The other two, I think, are more interesting choices were Daniel Day-Lewis.
Okay. And
Derek Jacobi.
Well,
I think he might have been able to do it.
He might have been able to do it. He's got these, in the movie Dead Again, he plays a really, really quite a,
Yes, we should do that one day.
Oh, it's a good movie.
But Hackman he wasn't going to be cast as Lecter. He was going to be cast as Jack Crawford, the senior agent.
Oh, okay, he would have done that as well. But Scott Glenn is very good. Yeah,
he turned it down because he found the script too violent. And I'm with him.
It's interesting because in reading the novel and seeing the story, I read the novel of Hannibal and the sequel, and I was really looking forward to the movie because it was written by David Mamet and directed by Ridley Scott, and I thought this is a really good team. But I felt they really butchered the book, and they really lost the focus of the actual book of Hannibal. It's quite a big book, and it really delves into the psychological nature of this character, and goes into his sort of dream worlds as well into it. So it is a good book. But in the movie, when they showed it to Jodie Foster didn't want to play Clarice again because they didn't like she didn't like where Thomas Harris took the character. Where the character goes and where Clarice goes with Hannibal is I can't see the Jodie Foster portrayal of Clarice Starling going there. So it's interesting.
I don't think I want to know.
Yeah.
Can I tell you that The Silence of the Lambs does have something in common with It Happened One Night?
Okay, give me that.
Well, I suspect you're going to be a bit horrified by this, but both of them were turned into musicals.
Silence of the Lambs wasn't turned into a musical.
Yeah, there is an off-Broadway musical created in 2005. It's called Silence the Musical, with an exclamation mark after silence. Created by John and Al Kaplan. I've seen little excerpts on YouTube. And I think what's going to most horrify you, it's meant to be a parody of the film.
Yes.
What will probably most horrify you is not only do Hannibal and Clarice and Crawford and other characters sing, so do the lambs. There is a chorus of actors dressed as lambs who pop in and out and sing different things as well.
Oh, wow.
I'm going to have to send you the link.
Yeah, please send me the link of that.
I don't think we'll put it on the podcast, but it does have that, has that in common as well. And while I'm telling you odd things about this film, I did watch the credits. I noticed that there was someone in the credits whose job was, and I quote, assistant moth wrangler and stylist.
The moth wrangler. Yeah, we haven't talked about the death moth, have we?
No, which is so prominent on the film's poster in Jodie Foster's mouth.
It's a pretty amazing moth, and very clever to put that in there. The death's head moth. I mean, that's just another aspect of the film, which is just really good. It's another small detail, which, you know, did it need to be there? Not really, but it's still another really good detail.
Well, according to the end credits, assistant moth wrangler and stylist was Leonore G. Drogan, which is one of those names that doesn't seem quite like a real name. So I looked up on IMDb and Google. I couldn't find anything else she did. And then I thought, well, you know what? Hannibal Lecter was into anagrams, so maybe it's a joke in the credits. So I tried anagramming Leonore G. Drogan, and what I got was a drooling genre, and that's pretty much this film.
A drooling genre.
A drooling genre.
Give me a break. Come on, Greg.
And I can't discuss this film without mentioning something that really got my attention, which was they had an FBI cake at their graduation. Did you see that?
Yeah, I did. Looked like a really nice cake too.
Well, before you ask me, let me tell you what I give this film. I'm giving it a 7. I think the story is fairly straightforward, very grim and distasteful, as I say. But once you get past the two central characters, a couple of sequences, I actually don't find a lot there.
Well, let me tell you, that's a lot higher than I thought you were going to give it, and I was about.
I don't hate it. I mean, I acknowledge I didn't really see it myself, but I acknowledge the direction. I'm not sure about the script. I acknowledge the two central performances. They're terrific, and as you say,
the cinematography and the score add to the feeling of it. It's a real. I mean, I'm giving it a 10 out of 10. It's a film which just works on every level. There's not a weak point. It's one of those magical things which happens with films where every department is on song. They are all working together. It all comes together beautifully. I mean, look, Jonathan Demme did all different types of movies. He didn't do other thrillers after this. He did Philadelphia, which was another very good film, which I watched recently, actually. But this film is beautifully made. It really is.
Well, if you loved The Silence of the Lambs and give it 10 out of 10, just wait until you see Silence the musical.
I can't wait.
Complete with singing lambs.
I can't wait. So that concludes episode 4 of season 4 of the Filmmaker Film Watcher podcast. Thank you for listening. Next episode, Greg.
Yes.
Look, we are in Victoria, Melbourne, Victoria at the moment, and we are stuck in stage 4 quarantine at the moment. We have a curfew at 8 p.m. Never been done in Australia's history.
No.
We can't go out much. It's about time to have a laugh.
And in fact, this episode was my special request to you, and saying we watched a lot of heavy films like The Silence of the Lambs.
Great film.
The non-musical version. And I said, and I like a lot of people, there have been times when I felt quite dispirited about being locked down and that we don't seem to be making a lot of progress. And we know there are places in the world that are a lot worse off than we are as well.
Absolutely.
So I suggested to Ricardo that we pick 3 films that are our kind of go-to films to make us laugh. Yep. So we're going to get a film that Ricardo loves that I've never seen, and then vice versa. And then we're going to try a film that neither of us has seen. And one of our key criteria will be, did it make you laugh? So the first one we're going to see is, chronologically speaking, is the one that neither of us has seen before, which is Duck Soup, 1933 film by the Marx Brothers. And I haven't, and I don't know that you've ever seen a Marx Brothers film.
I've seen a Marx Brothers film. I've bits and pieces here and there, but
scenes.
Film, scenes and whatnot. So it'd be really interesting for me to see this Duck Soup, because I know it's a classic. I've heard it's a classic. I've read that it's a classic, but it's going to be a really good one to visit.
Absolutely. And then you have a film for me.
I do have a film for you. This one just makes me laugh every time I see it. Is Happy Gilmore, Adam Sandler's Happy Gilmore, which was made in 1996. This film just makes me laugh every time. I can watch it endlessly. I love it.
You know, this is going to be one of those episodes where we have to say to each other, tread softly because you tread on my dreams.
Yeah.
So
Look, comedy's so subjective, and film, I mean, any art form is subjective, but I mean, there's comedy, what makes you laugh is vice versa, can probably make me laugh, so I don't know whether your one's going to be funny or not.
Well, the dream that I plan to lay out before your delicate feet is 2001 Rat Race, which is a remake of the film from the 60s, It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, which you haven't seen either, have you?
No, I haven't. Look, I've heard of Rat Race. I know the front cover to Rat Race, but I haven't seen it, and I look forward to that one.
It's a film that
makes me laugh.
It's a film that gets quoted in my family, actually.
Well, Silence of the Lambs didn't scare you, so I don't know whether this will make me laugh. So.
What a pity! What a pity this isn't our Silence of the Lambs. Yeah, I was just thinking, what a pity that this isn't our Christmas episode. I could have gone humbug.
Oh, jeepers, Greg.
See you next time.
I'll see you next time.